growing. Welcome. My name is Johnny. I'm here with Jeff Hayes. He's the director of a number of great films. He's an award winning producer, all about standing up and speaking truth to power. Recently, with Toxic Nation, and one of my favorites was The Real Anthony Fauci. Welcome, Jeff. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thank you. I was just watching your film again, and yeah, it's just unbelievable all the toxicity, as Americans especially, that we're up against.
Yeah, and this is really tricky because we've traded health for convenience. And, I still do it in my own life, where um, at my studio, I'll be headed out and I'll grab a bottle of water in a plastic container. And it's like, okay, I really have to stop drinking out of, plastic containers. It's bad for the environment. It's bad for my body, the microplastics. At the same time, do I want to stop, go in, fill up a glass bottle and just in the name of convenience? And if you look at all the things that we do, that these little things that make our life easier, but we're exchanging our own health for it.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. You talk about the plastics in the water bottles, and it these water bottles shouldn't be left out in the sun. But how many times have we seen at a gas station or a grocery store, they got them all sitting out front, in the sun for weeks on end. And it's just people aren't aware, that being in the sun, being in the heat like that, those chemicals are getting into the water. They're saying that we're you know eating, ingesting up to a credit card's worth of plastic every week, and we're finding that much in our brain. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, in autopsies, they're finding a teaspoon of microplastics in human brains. Then, yeah, a credit card consuming on a weekly basis the equivalent of a credit card's worth of plastic. And these microplastics, the environment that we've created, um, and some of us clear this stuff very well, and but you look at what is happening to the health of our children. Their systems are still being formed, and that's where we're seeing chronic illness in kids that have never appeared before. um, and it's just a direct result of the environment that we're putting ourselves in, with the way we're raising our food, the way we're living in our environment, from EMFs and through the air, through. I was at a restaurant. I went to a restaurant Monday to eat, and it was closed. And the owner opened the door and said, "Yeah, hey, we're closed on Mondays." And this is a restaurant in Salt Lake City called Contento. It's a Mexican restaurant that is gluten free, seed oil free. Their beef is grass fed beef. Their corn that they use to make tortilla chips is from an ancient grain, non GMO corn. And I mean, I was stunned when I went to this place that, I'm looking at the menu. I've never before seen a gluten free Mexican food restaurant. And then, their tortilla chips are fried in tallow, in beef fat, everything the way I would do it. And so I asked the owner, what what uh, um, what caused you to do this? And he looked at me and goes, "That's not the right question. The question to ask is, all the other restaurants, why would you feed people stuff that's not healthy? Why would you do that?" He says, "I don't, this didn't require a lot of thought. I'm not going to feed my customers poison. I'm going to feed them the healthiest, the thing I can feed them to make them feel the best." I'm just like stunned. It's good to see somebody putting their money where their mouth is and really standing up for it.
Yeah, it's all of us. It's our families, it's our loved ones, and it's just, yeah, a little more expense now, but that's that much less expense you're gonna spend at a doctor's, waiting in a waiting room, and having a lousy day after you eat that meal, not enjoying it as much, and not feeling good the next day. So yeah, it's just we got to make the food the medicine again, don't we?
That's been I'm doing 4 separate films under the Maha Films banner. The first one, Toxic Nation, was about toxins. The second one is called The Truth About Medicine, that covers all of the things in the Maha Commission's agenda, where we're covering pharmacy benefit managers and their effect on our drug prices, but peptides, stem cells, all the different components of medicine. The third one is on food and agriculture, and the fourth one is on trauma and addiction. And these are 4 big legs on a stool that, like, we're not going to be healthy as a country if we continue to poison ourselves, but we also have to deal with the childhood trauma of people walking around that is a driver of bad health. It really is going to take us a decade, if we're working on it aggressively, to turn around our whole system. But after filming over 130 interviews on all of these topics, the biggest thing I've come away with is the biggest impact that we can make right now is to clean up our food supply. And you can do this as an individual. Dan Pompa in the film that you saw says everybody that's watching this can improve their health by Monday by just giving themselves an oil change. Everybody needs an oil change, and that is to drop any seed oil out of your life and replace it with butter, olive oil, avocado oil, the tallow, lard, these fats that our grandparents lived on and our great grandparents lived on, that we've been taught were unhealthy, or instead are the healthiest foods that we can be consuming. So if I could give one quick message to anybody, is give yourself an oil change. The average American, 40% of their calories every day come from fat, and of those, 82% are from seed oils. So literally 30% of the average American's diet is seed oils. It's just a massive amount. And these polyunsaturated fatty acids, or PUFAs, are inflammatory. They're adulterated. They start to go rancid as soon as they're in the bottle, or it actually starts before they're chemically created. It takes a lot to make a seed oil processed. I think there's 9 to 11 steps, and just to make it where it's stable enough to be clear, and highly unstable oils that start to immediately oxidize. And this oxidation, taking that into your body, this is the source of all disease, is the inflammation, from heart attacks to cancer. Is you can trace it all back to oxidative stress in our own bodies, and we're doing it with our spoons, knives, and forks.
It's unbelievable. Yeah, this was something that's never been in our diet until, like you said, just last couple generations. And Americans were getting the brunt of this. And, I've heard it explained, these omega-6s, right? They're so inflammatory. But your film did such a good job to really diving in, really describe and laying out, especially how, these are getting into the cell membranes, and they're just so easy to get all over the body and affecting our mitochondria. This is why so many of us don't have the energy we should. So yeah, I love that. That's a great line. We're due for an oil change, aren't we?
I'm telling you. So, and the caveat here is omega-6s are very good for us. So this is where they match, omega-6s match the cell membrane. They go right into the cell membrane because they're look very much like, chemically, like the cell membrane of our own cells. And so this is where like recently Whole30 came out and said we're reversing our position on seed oils. We now have reviewed 35 studies that have shown that seed oils are healthy. And I'm like, okay, I want to get to the bottom of this. I called Kate Shanahan, and they're printing this in newspapers. Seed oils, 35 studies show that these are very healthy. And the bait and switch is they start talking about seed oils, and then the research is not on seed oils, it's on omega-6. And so omega-6s are essential fatty acids. Omega-3s, omega-6, omega-9s, these are all essential fatty acids. You have to have them. We have way too much omega-6 in our diet, so that's not good to have that overabundance. But we're not talking about the omega-6s. We're talking about oxidized omega-6, and the fact that omega-6s get into the cells. Now all of a sudden you're taking this damaged omega-6 right into your cells. So when you start to see people talking about seed oils, make sure that you're paying attention to the when they start quoting the research that's not on seed oils, it's on omega-6. And it's easy, like would vilify omega-6, and that's not accurate. You don't want too much of any one of them, but you definitely don't want any oxidized omega-3s, omega-9s, or omega-6s. It's kind of like fish oil. The good thing about fish oil, if you take it, you can tell when it's gone rancid, because you'll burp up, a disgusting fishy smell. That unfortunately omega-6s don't have an odor that lets you know that they've gone rancid, because they've been chemically treated not to.
Right, and they're using hexane. They're using these are carcinogens that are found in there, and then soy and canola, right? These are GMOs, right? So they're using glyphosate in the fields to help with weeds, right? So these commodity products, this is what's happened with so many of them in America, is that they're GMO now, and we're getting this overuse of glyphosate that is just another problem that just as bad, maybe worse even. So
yeah, this is going to require a lot of thought. As I talk to these farmers, these farmers love the land. I mean, for the most, these guys are doing this because they love this. Often, the farm has been in their family. They're making it on 3 to 4% margins, and they have big mortgages on their farms. It takes 3 years to convert your farm from a chemical farm to a regenerative farm, and you lose money for those 3 years. And literally, if a row farmer, corn, cotton, soy, wheat, row farmer switches over to regenerative farm and regenerating his soil, the bank would own his farm before he could turn the corner. And so they are stuck. They see the damage that's happening. They see the lower production, the low yields of what they're doing, but they're not going to let the weeds win. So, okay, we'll stop using glyphosate, but what are we going to replace it with? And they're going to replace it with something that is as bad, or if not worse. And so this is going to require a concerted effort and probably some help from the government to help farmers make a transition, because it's not true that we have to have these chemicals to farm. There are other ways to do it that are just as profitable, if not more profitable. Joel Salatin has a way more successful farm and ranch per acre than 4 to 5 times as much yield per acre as a chemical farmer. But helping the farmers get there, it's not just like we can go, hey, we need to get together and ban glyphosate. I would love for that to be true, but if we did that, then what comes next? And so and that's how they hold a gun to our head, say, well, you'll starve to death if we get rid of this stuff. And it's not true. It just is going to take some preparation and some thought, and it's going to take some political will, and it's going to take people demanding cleaner food supply.
yeah, we got to phase it out. It's gonna, like you said, it's gonna take a number of years. It's so entrenched now. We're using over a pound per person, and just a tiny bit is so toxic. 99.9% of it's not even killing any weeds. It's just running off into our water, coming down in our rain. And one place I'd like to see them start is they say, there's no country in Europe that allows what we allow as far as spraying glyphosate on our crops at harvest, as a pre-harvest desiccant to kill them. This is something they're doing with our grains, something that we're doing with our beans. So these are great ones to get organically. But this is maximizing profits where maybe if some rain's coming, hurry up and harvest it. And but they say this is up to 80% of our glyphosate exposure. So this would be a great first step. Just ban it like other countries have. And we got to start somewhere. That's for sure.
And yeah, unfortunately, I think the law just changed in Spain to allow that in Spain also, which this deal of who would vote for that if they were not being funded by Monsanto and the people that are interested in selling more. There's the limits that we set in the United States for the amount of residue that you're allowed to have are the highest in the world, where you couldn't have it in Europe. And literally in the last few years, as glyphosate stops being as effective as it has been, farmers are having to use more. And so they literally went to the government and said, we need to adjust those limits up because we need more. And so we just arbitrarily, no hearings, no studies, no research done, they raised the limits again to allow for more residue. And you got to ask the question, why in the world do we in the U.S. have higher limits than anywhere else in the world on the amount of toxins that are allowed to be in our food?
Yeah, that's something that your film went over real well. I hadn't heard before, right? Yeah, you had Carrie Gillum in there talking about how this is some of the corruption we're seeing, and also the Monsanto papers, how of course they've doctored the science. We caught them red-handed. When there's a study that's published that Big Pharma doesn't like, they get it retracted. They lean on the journals. These papers that Monsanto had published are still being referenced by our EPA about how glyphosate is safe for us, and we've caught them red-handed in their internal memos, committing fraud against the public. And this is something that people need to wake up to, what we're up against.
Yeah, it was fascinating to interview Carrie Gillum. As I was talking to her, so she was a financial reporter in Atlanta for Reuters, and 25 years ago, and they asked her if she'd be willing to move to Wichita, Kansas to cover agriculture. And she had family there, so she moved, and she didn't know anything. She's just a reporter, and for mainstream media. And so she's covering Monsanto, is Cargill. She's covering all about agriculture, but including the big input generators that are creating these products. And she got to know the president, the CEO of Monsanto, got to know people there. And she said, friendly, she wrote lots of good articles about the things they're doing and as they're reporting stuff. And then in the early 90s, studies started being published showing damage caused by glyphosate. And she reported on that. And she told me that Monsanto was very good with the carrot and the stick. And so when she was just doing objective reporting, here's the research that's coming out, they suddenly became unfriendly to her, and then they started to attack her. They put up a site under a different name, talking about untrustworthy reporters, and listed her in that group. And eventually she left Reuters and became an independent reporter. And then she wrote the Monsanto papers, and then she followed the trial all the way through. But this was just a reporter trying to do the report. What I was interested in is she would have dinner with employees of Monsanto. These people, she would have a relationship with. And I'm like, what was it like? What was it like to have somebody and then you know them as a family man. They've got kids. They're, good people. And then you realize they're doing things that are, you can only classify as evil. And that would be this would be like finding out your dad's in the mafia. It's like, what? Dad's a hitman? And I thought it would be more difficult for her. And interestingly, she just took a reporter's view of it. Is like she didn't ever really become friends with them. She stayed a reporter the whole time, and she saw them as human beings, but she also saw what they were collectively doing. But to me, it's a fascinating human study.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. It's good work she did, and but yeah, it's unreal the corruption that has been exposed, and then you talk about captured entities, the fact that her work wasn't just echoed throughout all of journalism and isn't more widely known. This is just a crime against humanity. They've bought our media, the big pharma has, and big ag the same way. They pay for their spots and set their narrative. And yeah, so films like yours, getting the word out, it's just so important. Right now they're going after liability shields, just like they got for vaccines back in the 80s. So now, they're trying to just take our constitutional rights from us to stand up to get due process when our families are harmed. And they're going state by state. They tried to put this in the Farm Bill last year. I'm sure they'll try again. And this is crazy. They're saying that their justification is that, we need these poisons to grow our food or else we'll have famines. And of course, the pushback is, well, no other country's growing their food with this much poison. We mentioned Europe already. And we've never even had these poisons until just a generation ago. So, I'm looking forward to seeing your film coming out on regenerative agriculture. Is that what you're learning going around to these farmers so far?
Yeah, and I'm telling you what we filmed on the King Ranch, which was the largest ranch in the world at one point. It's been in the same family for 180 years, down in between Corpus Christi and San Antonio, Texas. They actually have their own town there called Kingsville. And there were the two guys there, actually three, named Pancho, and I'm watching them, and they're riding horses, and we were there for their annual branding where they're branding the cattle, and the Pancho, the oldest one, Pancho, just is from Mexico, just looks like a Mexican migrant worker, dressed nice, but, riding a horse. And then his son is also named Pancho. And then his son is named Pancho, who's just a teenager. But, I'm watching these guys separating the cattle and doing their branding. And it turns out that the two Panchos, the father and the son, are both PhDs, or some of the world's experts on agriculture and animals and how animals thrive on the land. And they're brought in to work with them. You can't judge a book by its cover. I'm just seeing this friendly man, that is, like a normal Mexican farm worker. Instead, he's one of the world's experts on how animals thrive on ranches. And his son is also a PhD. But the love that they have for the land and the stewardship, he says, we don't feel like that we own this land. We feel like we're stewards of this land for our children who own this land. And that's the love that they put into what they're doing. At the same time, I'm looking around and I'm seeing, they're using antibiotics. They're using things that, this, it is for ranchers to make a living. It is a very difficult business. This goes to the four big meat processors control 80% of the beef that we get in this country. These meat packers, Cargill, and one of them owned by the Chinese, two of them owned by Brazilian companies. they hold the cow for 1 week after a rancher has spent a year and a half, calving a baby calf, raising it, feeding it, taking care of it, making sure it's healthy for a year and a half. Then they turn it over to the meat packer who sets the price. And the meat packer has that animal for 1 week and then sells it, packages it. And the distribution on that, the meat packer makes 62 and a half cents, and the rancher who raised the cow makes 37 cents out of every dollar that we spend on beef. So the money is not going to the ranchers. The money's going to the four big companies that are controlling our meat supply. And so we've got to look at this, and we've got to figure out ways to get more money to the rancher. People need to know their farmer, know their rancher. If you can buy direct, you really are supporting the people who are feeding the world, not just this country.
Yeah, that's something I know Thomas Massey's put forward legislation, the Prime Act, to try to help with this a little bit, to where at least if there's not interstate commerce, that we can do these, harvesting these animals locally in our states. But yeah, it's just unreal how we've let these industry interests really consolidate power this way. And it's with the help of the legislature, right? They've captured our system, and they get to write the laws essentially to make it so where the small producers, they can't compete, they can't have the millions of dollars needed to satisfy the laws that maybe are good laws for the big meat packers, but it's unreal what we're letting happening.
Yeah, Smithfield Foods controls the pork in this country, and everywhere they go, I think 60,000 pig farmers went out of business as they drove the price down. And what this guy Murphy was a state legislator in, I believe, North Carolina, and he got a bunch of laws passed. They called them Murphy's laws. That allowed him to do what he saw what the big chicken producers, Tyson, and the big chicken producers were doing by putting chickens all in these enclosed hens and mass producing chickens. And he created the same system for pigs. Eventually he sold Smithfield Foods to a Chinese company, and now it's a Chinese company that owns the biggest percentage of our pork supply in the United States. Is they're mass producing manufactured meat with these pigs. Bobby Kennedy has sued them many times over the years. I think they've paid in lawsuits that Bobby Kennedy has brought over $600 million in penalties and lost cases. And they just continue to rock on doing this. And as this manufactured meat, but again, it comes to the same story. Oh, well, it's the only way to do this. We're losing the small farmer. We're losing the pig farmers. We're losing because they can't make it unless they join in with these big meat packers.
Right. And then this is crucial because we're losing our local sovereignty. We're losing that independence. We're losing that community resilience come supply chain disruptions. And, we're losing as well this accountability. We can't see what's going on. The idea that we live in a free country and that they can have laws in place that don't allow, an employee at one of these facilities to take a photo of their day at work because it's all under wraps how our food's being made. It's just unbelievable.
Where it's illegal to go inside and film, and it's like, wait a minute, how does that benefit anyone?
Right. Democracy, being a free, it's all about transparency, and this is just unreal. You've been so great about these other films you've made, Doctored and The Real Anthony Fauci. What's something surprising that you've learned from seeing the corruption, and how does that compare maybe from big pharma to big agriculture?
Yeah, I'm a capitalist. I'm a little L libertarian. It's like capitalism has been almost sacred to me. And I have a friend, Patrick Byrne, that used to be the CEO of Overstock.com, who's politically brilliant, and has his PhD in philosophy from Stanford, was a professor at Stanford. And I'm like, Patrick, how do I reconcile what I'm seeing with, my belief in and love of capitalism? He goes, Jeff, this is not capitalism. This is crony capitalism. And it's really, from regulatory capture, from people playing on an unequal playing field. And I'm seeing it across the board, from big food to big ag to big pharma. And one that doesn't get a lot is big insurance. Big insurance is 4 times as much money as big pharma. And the travesty of the way they've set up pharmacy benefit managers, this supposedly to drive drug prices down, and they're being a middleman that's getting absolutely rich. We're covering in The Truth About Medicine, the 5 big insurance companies own the 5 big pharmacy benefit managers. And pharmacy benefit managers were supposed to negotiate good drug prices. So it seems good on the surface, but once they were bought by the drug companies, what they do now with kickbacks and rebates, they'll go in and negotiate a price with a pharmaceutical company, but then they charge a different price to the insurance, or they will pay a higher price but demand a 75% rebate that stays with the pharmacy benefit manager. The insurance company who owns them pays a higher price, but their subsidiary is taking all the profit out of the transaction. And then the insurance company goes to their employers that buy their insurance, say, hey, your insurance has to go up because your people are using so many drugs. And so they're making money as an insurance company, but then they're making a giant amount in their subsidiary, the pharmacy benefit manager. Had a compounding pharmacist who sells at his cost plus a $10 fee and a 10% or 15% markup. So there's a drug, metformin ER, that his cost on it, what he sells it for out the door, is $26.50. Meanwhile, Medicare, Medicaid is paying $1,800 a month for that drug. So,
Wow.
the difference is going to the pharmacy benefit manager. And he gave example after example where literally on this one drug, Medicare, Medicaid could save $4 billion a year by just not overpaying, by paying what he pays. It's a complicated topic, but once you look at where the money's really flowing, and in this case, the pharmaceutical company selling that, they're selling it for less than $26, to compounding pharmacies or to pharmacies that are selling locally.
That's incredible, isn't it? Bankrupt in our country in so many ways. We're letting this all happen. What do you think the answer is to this crony capitalism, and how can we make things better?
So one of the things that Bobby Kennedy is doing that is very smart and was his plan, it's when I began to believe, okay, we really can change this, because it feels so big, it's overwhelming. It's like, okay, we're just doomed. We can't fight against this. But in order to file a lawsuit against somebody for your product injured me, there's got to be some level of science that already exists that you can point to as a justification for that suit, where I can't sue Nestle's cocoa for getting cancer because, well, I drank cocoa when I was a kid and I just decided it's Nestle's cocoa that gave me the cancer. There's no science to support that, and so they don't have to worry about suits with no basis in reality. But meanwhile, the NIH, being as captured an agency as they have been, they have tons of research that they've never done. that they've been instructed not to look in these areas. So they're not even looking at chronic disease. They've been just looking at infectious diseases of where all the money has been going. So Bobby is going to have the NIH has already started, do these studies that they haven't done. Let's see the effect of glyphosate. Let's see the effect of atrazine. Let's see the effect of all of these chemicals. Let's do the studies on red dye number 4, which, when they ask the chairman of the FDA, why have you approved, red dye number 4? And he goes, well, we haven't even looked at it in 10 years. And this was a chemical that, a fabric dye that they just started putting into food without any research whatsoever, without looking at the facts, and then never did any studies on it. Once these studies are done, now we can mobilize the trial lawyers in this country. If the base of science is there, then we don't have to enforce it by the government. The trial lawyers are pretty good at going after the money. And if they see these big companies are doing things that are harming people, this army of trial lawyers will cause companies to want to do the right thing. And so when he explained that to me is when I'm like, okay, there is a way out of this. I'm normally, just by personal preference, kind of against trial lawyers. In this case, I'm like, well, let's turn them loose. Let's get them working on our behalf.
Yeah, here. We need accountability, and that's the way things are set up. So that's it. Jeff, I really appreciate. You have Nikola Tesla there on your logo, on your icon at the beginning of your films. And that reminds me of
and on my hat,
on your hat there too. There he is. I'm a big fan of his, and it reminds me our conversation here, all the suppression that he saw and how he was really trying to, use all this technology for the good of mankind. And it was kind of more focused towards, how to profit for whoever was in charge. So I wanted to ask, what was the inspiration for you to use Tesla there that way?
I loved his innovation. I loved the fact that, first off, his brilliance. If we've ever been visited and lived amongst us by aliens, I would put, Nikola Tesla, maybe Elon Musk. There's a few people you go, okay, I'm assuming they're human, but if I found out they were from another planet, it wouldn't shock me. And he's one that his level of brilliance. But I like what he withstood so many attacks, and he stood for truth. He wanted to bring free energy to people. And, even his papers that were confiscated after his death, there were things in there that we still haven't, riddles we haven't solved. So I thought he was just a personal inspiration for me.
I love that. That's great. Speaking of, technology that we're not really tapped into yet, I'm all about telling people, let's plant paradise everywhere. This is all this green, this is all solar energy, and it's all making the food and the medicine and everything we need. And so, we've got the answers. We just need to keep on raising the awareness. And so thank you for everything you've been doing about helping get the word out about what you're doing, Jeff.
Thank you. I love to do it. People can see Toxic Nation for free right now, just going to mahafilms.com. And I think we did a really good job with it. And I'm going to do a real good job with the rest of them. I'm loving the people I'm getting to meet, some of the bravest people in the world that have stood for truth, and now a lot of them starting to be vindicated as the tide's turning a bit. But I do want people to be a part of this Maha movement, and step one is to go to mahafilms.com and watch Toxic Nation while it's still up for free.
Yeah, the first step is admitting we got a problem. We got to be an informed electorate if we're going to be a real free people who are represented properly. And So let's do that. Let's spread the word about it.
I love it.
Mahalo for everything you're doing, Jeff.
Thank you. Great to see you again.